live a chance to hop in if they're going to join us. But this is the Looking Both Ways podcast. I am Pastor Tim alongside Pastor Rich. And it's been a quiet day, really quiet day here. But I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to taking a chance to pause for the day, and hopefully you are doing that with us to look back at what we talked about this past Sunday, this previous Sunday, and then also look forward to what God has for us coming this weekend. So, Pastor Rich, thanks so much for doing this, and I'll let you take it away. So, how do you feel this past weekend was, and kind of for those that might not have been here or that might be wanting a little bit of a reminder, where did God take us this past weekend?
Well, it was good to be back. I felt like I hadn't been here in like a year, but I hadn't been up there in like really in any way for like 3 weeks. So I just stepped in where you guys left off with Corinthians as far as that goes. So it's good to be back doing that role as well. And so I got to come in on this end of chapter 1, which we talked about the power of the cross and God's wisdom. And we'll talk about that as well this week in chapter 2. But uh, just the wisdom of the cross is not the wisdom of the world. And we spend an awful lot of most of the message, and that's what Paul's point is that God's wisdom is not human wisdom, and human wisdom would consider the cross foolish or stupid. That's what the word means, stupid, in their eyes, because for them and in the Corinthian culture, it didn't to say that a guy dying on a form of Roman capital punishment somehow had some kind of spiritual benefit to mankind would have been in their mind a stupid thing to even consider. And then from the Jewish perspective, that's not how the Messiah was supposed to come. Messiah is supposed to be coming and ruling and kicking Rome out and making things right. And Jesus, in their perspective, didn't do that either. So God's wisdom is, by the world standard, foolish. And part of that is we have to accept that as followers of Christ, that what we believe in many parts of the world is, in many parts of worldviews of out there, is considered foolish. And to live our lives based off of foolishness to them seems foolish. And that's how their logic goes. And it's really that simple. But for us, we embrace it. We embrace the cross. This is God's answer for human uh, sin, human problem. The solution is Jesus. And we say that a lot. And that's where we're going with this. And so our calling that we talked about earlier comes from Jesus. And our reason we have all this is because of Jesus. And what God does is he sets it up in such a way that we are made humble. We don't bring anything to the table. We never did, and we never will. And that's Paul's point. And so the Corinthian eloquence of speech, wealth, sophistication, all the stuff that was causing all kinds of issues in their church, uh, God just takes that and says, no, that's not what it's about. It's about a cross. And they have to embrace that and accept that. And so we took that to the Unfiltered Church thing, and we talked about this, and something we should probably talk about a little bit, just going back and forth, is just the idea that as a church, we shouldn't compare ourselves to others. As Christians, we shouldn't compare ourselves to others. As churches, we shouldn't compare ourselves to others. And we all deal with that. I mean, that's a human natural tendency. But to compare leads to down a road that if you're not careful, can bring you into compare can lead to envy. Envy can lead to jealousy. Jealousy leads to problems. and so we don't try and compare ourselves to other churches because we can't. We're our own church. Do we look at other churches and what they're doing in their practices? Sure, we do. Everybody does that. That's just trying to be better at what we're trying to do. But we don't. As Christians, we shouldn't compare each other to one another, and we shouldn't compare our church to some other church in town, and use that as some people do. I had this conversation today with somebody. Some people like to say, well, my church does this compared to this church, and that's why you should come here because we do this, and we don't do that. And they started sitting there trying to expose one church's weaknesses as opposed to the church they go to, what they feel like is a strength. And every church has their strengths and every church has their weaknesses. It leads to kingdom envy and not kingdom advancement.
Yeah, well, and that's what we talked about, not last week, but the week before, of again this idea that our way is better. When we have disunity in the church, a lot of it's from pride. And now it's okay to be proud of what God is doing in your church, but to have pride in it, to think that you are better than another church instead of coming along churches, that's the dividing factor.
Yeah.
And again, that's why I think God took the passage that way. Disunity is ultimately at the root of it because of pride.
Mhm.
That we don't want to either understand that there are multiple ways to skin a cat, so to speak, and that God works differently, and that there are different missions, and not just different missions, but different submissions, you can say, like how God is using that church to accomplish His mission is different from the next church, as long as they are Bible believing
Mhm.
and Bible proclaiming. And man, the comparison is real, and social media doesn't help. That everybody on social media has their best life out there, and that's what we compare it to, as if that's the 24/7, 365 reality, and that's just not true. That's
Right.
one of the dangers, and one of the causes of poor mental health, is that we are constantly on a hamster wheel trying to compete with a standard that's not reality. And churches are no different. I work in media
Uh-huh.
ministry, and I see all of the uh, you know the stuff out there with the reels that you make, and the audience that you have, and the likes that you get, and how this thing performed versus that thing. And um, uh, I mean, it can become your idol very, very quickly. And again, it puts you on a hamster wheel going in no direction. Because we're not about making ourselves look good. We are about making Christ look good. And yeah, and so if something's working great for a church down the road, I tell people this all the time, because I do think that our church does a lot of great things. We don't own anything; we manage stuff. And so if somebody at another church looked at what we were doing, which has happened, whether it's with Peak or Engage or whatever, um, and they say, "Man, that's really awesome," I say, "Steal it, take it," because if it's working for the kingdom, why wouldn't we try and adapt that for what God's doing here? Whether it's, I mean, I've even got, I visited another church on my vacation. So sorry.
And I
Um,
tell people to do that all the time.
and we went to my wife's church where she became a Christian, and they had these laying on, and I love physical media still, but they had these laying on every chair. They're two-sided.
Mhm.
Tay did her little artwork on the back. Uh, but it's just a connect and a prayer card. And again, I think we have the QR codes and stuff like that, but just having that touch on the chair, and an opportunity to connect, and to give something that the hosts pick up and that we actually look at and pray over and connect with. So much can get lost in the web of digital space. And man, when you have something like this, it was just so nice. And yeah, and so I wanted to adapt that for our church, and I've got it up here so that way when I get time, um, we can adapt that for what we're doing here. And I think if it's in that vein of looking at what God's doing in other ministries around the world, and Rich, you can speak to this too. You think we go to Africa and we're just helping those people out there? Man, I learned more about ministry by serving them in Africa than I probably did in seminary, and things that we look at and we did, and we came back here and saying, man, like they're doing this. Well, what does that look like in our context? So,
Right. Well,
so
I
yeah,
think that's always what having to adapt to those things and learning from wherever people are trying to proclaim the truth and focus on Jesus is valuable for all of us. Uh, I mean, there's just some things that we can take because you're right. We have to answer the question for us in America, that with our bounds, our restrictions, our freedoms, whatever term you want to use, there are just certain things we can do in America that the church in Cuba just can't do right now and hasn't been able to do for a long time. But they are still doing their thing. And you learn a lot from them about their heart, their commitment, their resilience, and you learn just as much that type of stuff as it is practices and the document and the things that you see when you go and you look at other people and where they're doing church in their context, and that's the beautiful thing about being able to go and to do that kind of stuff. So, we don't compare ourselves to each other. We don't disqualify ourselves from usefulness. And I know people do that too. It's like, God saved you, God's gifted you, you're useful for the kingdom. That's clear. Well, we often make those kinds of choices, and then we don't try and earn what God gives by grace. The cross is how grace gets done. And, when I was first to experience grace, Jesus had to die on the cross. When we always want to focus on Jesus, and I just want to talk about the church stuff because people get caught up in things, and I think needed some explanation and stuff. And we don't get caught. Numbers are important. Sorry, they are. Numbers are important because numbers are people. You need dollars, and dollars are numbers to do ministry. But we don't get caught up in those things. We got to trust in Jesus and proclaim Jesus and do what he's called us to do. That should be our focus. Uh, God blesses us with gifts and talents to build his church, and we can't get caught up in the talent. I mean, there's a lot of talented people in a lot of churches. You get a lot of talented people in our church. You're just tapping into that. And then influence. Everybody wants to have influence. Leadership is influence. And so we want to have that, but we don't boast in that. We only boast in Christ. Any influence we have, anything we've been able to do to help other people or to have some kind of import is because of Jesus. I mean, I look at my own life. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm saved because of Jesus. I'm educated for my call to ministry because of Jesus. I'm called to churches because of Jesus. I've been able to travel the world because of Jesus, and I'm going to get to go to heaven because of Jesus. It kind of tells me that my life is really about Jesus in it.
Well, and it's really easy to make it about the wrong things and get distracted by the wrong things. I mean, when you compare, even take just worship on a Sunday or preaching or whatever it may be, and they can quickly become about the wrong things. And like, in fact, it weighed heavy on me. And so this week we're doing an acoustic Sunday. We've had some people step off the worship team, and whether they're moving or changing careers or whatever. And so some of our guys have been through a grind, and I want to give them a chance to just worship. And so something super fun. I've never done this, but I let them know that I was going to do that, and we're going to do an acoustic Sunday. But I actually asked our worship team, what is, based off of what God's teaching you and where God has our church, what are some songs that you guys want to worship to this Sunday? Mm-hmm. And so you'll see quite a few new songs on our set list this week. But man, as I just was putting the music in and listening to them, like I was getting choked up. And I actually texted our team and I said, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it through the set list. So it's, I think it's keeping the main thing the main thing. And I mean, if again, the only thing we should be comparing, the only thing we should be boasting in is our pursuit of godliness. So,
yeah, no, I think I love to hear that. And that's just responding to what God is doing in our midst and amongst our people, the people that are part of our church is always a good thing as we, look forward to this week. I love acoustic sets. I'm really at the point, and I guess I'm getting old. And for my kids, I am old, so I understand that. But just the idea of something a little quieter. I'm really, you know this. I've really studied a lot about these concepts of quiet and solitude, and I was listening to John Mark Comer on a podcast as I was traveling last week, and he was talking about taking he took a 3-week retreat. You can actually do this up in the Northwest. I think Corson does this from Calvary Chapel, and they take away everything. You can't have a phone. You have no contact. You cook your own food, and there's a thing to do it that starts at 5:50 in the morning and it goes the whole day, and it's quiet. And I was like, man, if I could ever do that, how would I handle 3 weeks of total silence? And his point was this. His point was that we live in a world filled with noise. And sometimes when we in church, we can become, uh, if we're not careful, guilty of just adding to the noise when they come to church. And maybe sometimes we just need to figure out a way to, instead of adding to the noise, contribute quiet, and in ways that we can do that as a church and as a church family. I think one of the ways we can do that is to going from what we do to acoustic is a perfect example of just taking something different and bringing something different from that. And I said it, you know this to be true. You've heard it for years as well. We can't compete with Hollywood, and we shouldn't try. Um, we just
Yeah, there is a point, and this is my world. There is a point, and I discourage this from a lot of people, but there's a point where it becomes overproduced and it becomes about the production, and the production, you're actually serving the production and not the what the production is there for. I mean, ultimately producing things and helping them to sound good and putting stuff out there is ultimately should be in the effort of making it less distracting. So you're not a clashing gong or a, a, a clanging cymbal.
And people need to know, guys, those that are watching, who will watch it, our goal here is to point you to Christ, to help you to inspire you to know him, to invite you to know him, inspire you to grow in him, and so that you can go out into the world and be him as a follower of Jesus. That's our mission. And we do the things we do in order to help you to do that. And so we want to stay focused on that because it is about Jesus. And that's Paul's point. It's about Jesus and the cross. You can't avoid the cross. Too many churches today, and I hate doing this, but I'm starting to see it more and more. I'm seeing a lot of good things, quite frankly. People are bringing it back, but there's a long season there where people are avoiding the issues that the cross brings up. We don't want to talk about like sin or the consequences of sin or the consequences of why Jesus died on the cross and the nature of that. We want to make him, as I heard Adrian Rogers say this. Everybody loves Jesus in a manger. They love the baby in the manger. They have a hard time with the guy on the cross. And we as a church, we don't have a church without the guy on the cross. And so that's what we focus on. That's what we want to try and get people more into do that. And then this week, I'm just going to transition over uh, to the wisdom of God this week, chapter 2. We're going to do all of chapter 2 this week. We are. It's all one thought. We might as well
buckle up, everybody.
Yeah, buckle up. I told Sarah yesterday. I already got it all turned in for her. The outline you're going to get on the back of the bulletin this week is about a third of what I have to share this week. So, with that, and so, but it's about the Holy Spirit and how God reveals His wisdom through the Spirit and His role in our life, and we trust in the Spirit's power. Yes, we do our work to preach, teach, and prepare to get with God and to do all those things, but it is not. You hear us say this all the time. It is not human persuasion that convicts and illuminates Jesus to people. That is God's job. Our job is to proclaim. And so we'll talk a lot about that. And there's going to be a whole lot about, because we come to that section, we're talking about we have the mind of Christ. And what does that mean? And how does that play in our lives? It's one of the main things that I'm going to talk about this week. But it's all in God's wisdom and in how we apply those things into the life of ourselves. And again, it takes away pride. It takes away despair as well, just as much. And so a lot of people don't, we love that verse. We have the mind of Christ, but we have no idea how to unpack it and live it out every day. And I want to spend a lot of time, I won't say a lot of time, a considerable amount of time focusing on that this week. Okay. We don't rely on brilliance. We rely on God's revelation.
That the Lord uses the weak to shame the strong. These common and ordinary uneducated men. Yeah, I mean, it's not about eloquence and did you go to seminary. My favorite prayers to listen to are Kennedy's and Tay's, because God is their best friend. So, and that's how it should be. And so I'm looking forward to that.
Yep.
I mean, this is I mean, Revelation gets a lot of credit as a difficult book to go through, but I think Romans and 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians are equally as dense theologically. And so for us, take some breathers and ask a lot of good questions. And again, hopefully this podcast helps with that in this, we can break down some of the difficult things that are discussed on Sundays, and it helps you to grow and helps you to understand. But we can't do that unless you engage in your spiritual growth and you ask good questions. And that's what we're here for as well. That yes, there's a sermon on a Sunday morning, but there's also conversations from Monday to Saturday. So engage in that. We look forward to seeing hopefully a lot of people here tonight. Does Rooted start tonight?
Rooted starts tonight, hoping to get that plugged in. I know we have around 14 for Spanish. I'm not really sure how many we have in English, to be honest with you. I'll be there. I'm going to take the Rooted group this time. If you've already been through Rooted, I encourage you to come back, because really I've taken the Wednesday night group and we just do, they just do a sermon-based Bible study. They just take what we,
That's awesome.
a lot of the guys take notes and girls take notes, and they just come it back in. They pray together, and they talk about what they heard from me last week and try and unpack it and understand it a little more themselves. It's proven to be very, very beneficial for them to just to take that. Sometimes we give people so much stuff, and we want to. I mean, we're creating content for a reason. And I read a lot about that this week too. It's like we create content because we know people are on their screens, whether this one right here that we're using or the one that's in their hand, whether a tablet or a phone. And all we're trying to do is you watch me an hour a week. Maybe if you do this 20 minutes or whatever, we're trying to tap into all that time that you spend on that screen. Because I read an article and I heard something too. We got to be very careful, and people have to be careful about, and this is being fearful, it's just truth. We cannot let our becoming like Jesus be dictated by an algorithm in our social media feed.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're not careful, if I'm not careful, if you're not careful, if our people aren't careful, they're going to be discipled by something that they maybe didn't think was being discipled from. And I think that's the biggest problem. People think that it's not influencing me. It's not influencing me. They didn't put those things in not to influence you. They get paid a lot of money to do this. So it's arrogant to think that you are not susceptible to these algorithms.
Well, it's not just that, but remember, an algorithm is going to show you what you want to see. And a lot of times for spiritual growth, we need to see the stuff that we don't want to see because it ultimately requires change. So
I try and read just as much stuff that it disagrees with me as agrees with me, so that I make sure that I'm not missing something.
Yep. If it doesn't challenge you, it won't change you. So we'll come tonight. Plenty of opportunities, and we'll advertise that better, but plenty of opportunities for growth and we look forward to having you all. What's better than having family together, right? So join us tonight. Join us on Sunday. Invite somebody new that God has been putting on your heart, and we hope that this resource is good for you and helpful for you. So this is the Looking Both Ways podcast. I'm Pastor Tim, alongside Pastor Rich, and we pray that you are having a great week. And if not, God will sustain you. And we look forward to seeing you all here soon.
See you later, everybody.
All right.